Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Byron Barnett. On the show today, Demick Health Center's annual Road to Wellness 5K run and walk is coming up soon, and we'll give you all the details on how you can participate. Also, an interesting and fun selfie campaign designed to help local businesses in Jamaica Plain as JP Local First is in the house. You'll meet that organization in just a bit. But up first, in spite of adversity and limited opportunities, African Americans have played a significant role in U.S. military history over the past several hundred years. One of the most amazing stories to come from often ignored parts of history is the story of the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen overcame segregation and prejudice to become one of the most highly respected fighter groups of World War II. It was because of the incredible achievements in the battlefield that the Tuskegee Airmen paved the way for full integration of the U.S. military. On Saturday, September 9th, the annual Harvey Sanford Tuskegee Airmen Scholarship event will take place at the Collings Foundation's Living History Museum of Antique Airplanes, unique classic cars, and rare historical artifacts. To tell us more about this amazing part of U.S. military history and this annual event, we've invited Willie Shellman. He's president of the New England chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. Also with us, Bob Collings. He's founder of the Collings Foundation, and Judith Sanford, Dr. Judith Sanford-Harris. She's a legacy member of the New England chapter of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated and the daughter of Harvey Sanford, whom the scholarship is named after, and a Tuskegee Airman himself. Welcome to Urban Update. Thank you all for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Willie, let me start with you. Just give our viewers kind of a short background on the Tuskegee Airmen and your organization, the New England Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated.
Well, thanks for having us, Byron. And as you mentioned, the Tuskegee Airmen grew from an experiment that the War Department decided to have in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And that experiment was to take African Americans and see if they could operate complicated machinery. And the most complicated at the time, with the pressing of the war, was what was called the Army Air Corps at that time, before the Air Force. So the experiment the War Department embarked on was using Tuskegee, Alabama as the background. They were going to train an all-black flying unit to be named the 99th Pursuit Squadron. And so from those humble beginnings, great men rose, were trained to fly the latest aircraft of the day, and went on to heroic success during World War II. Now, after World War II, 1955, a book was written about them by a Tuskegee Airman named Charles Francis. And out of that book sort of sprung the name Tuskegee Airmen. Before then, they were just the 99th Pursuit Squadron or the 332nd Fighter Group and various military designations. But the name Tuskegee Airmen has stuck through history, and we have formed, starting in early 1970, Tuskegee Airmen, Inc., and a national organization of about 50 chapters. And here in New England, we are fortunate to be one of the chapters. And the purpose of Tuskegee Airmen, Inc., of course, is to preserve the history and legacy of the men, the women, the pilots, the aviators, the navigators, all of the disciplines that it took to maintain a flying unit, to preserve their history, and to encourage young people today to go on to productive lives through education, through citizenship, through motivation, and encourage them always to do their very best in life.
Wow.
And the third purpose is to provide scholarships.
Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Right.
Bob Collings, to tell us about the Collings Foundation. I guess you're involved in the scholarship program here, and it sounds absolutely fascinating.
Well, the Collings Foundation was established in 1977 as a 501c3 educational foundation. We've always pursued the mission of living history, letting people participate in history, touch, smell, and feel, and so forth. In the mid-1980s, we got involved in aviation and aircraft restoration, and that's when we met Judy's dad, Harvey Sanford, who was a Tuskegee Airman and also a mechanic, and he helped work on and restore with us as a volunteer about 7 aircraft through the next 15 years or so. His good friend John Roach, also Tuskegee Airman, was a pilot, and John flew some of our airplanes, and so we've been involved with the Tuskegee Airmen since 1984, and then unfortunately with Harvey's passing this past year, we felt we wanted to honor him.
Okay, and I guess how did this partnership between the Tuskegee Airmen and the foundation come about?
Well, as Bob just mentioned, starting in '84, the partnership of restoration of antique aircraft started, and out of that antique aircraft, I think, and Bob can tell you more, a friendship developed between Harvey, John Roach, the Collings Foundation, and the story of World War II aircraft restoration and the Tuskegee Airmen. A friendship developed. And from that friendship, the Collings Foundation and several of the Tuskegee Airmen have stayed in contact over the years. And with the passing of Harvey, who was so integral in the Collings Foundation, the Collings Foundation stepped forward and says, we'd like to work with you in forming a scholarship in his name and furthering the legacy.
Judy, tell me a little bit about your dad, Harvey Sanford, his love for aviation and his role as a Tuskegee Airman.
My father was born in the South End of Boston, grew up in Boston, went to school here, and my grandfather was an auto mechanic, and my father loved airplanes from the time he was very little, so my grandfather would take him over to what was then East Boston Airport, which is now Logan, to watch them not only filling in the harbor, but also watching the planes fly, come in, fly, take off. And my father went to Boys Trade in aeronautics, and then worked as a jet mechanic for a time after Tuskegee. He was a mechanic at Tuskegee as well, and I think a supervisor of the mechanics there. Worked at Hanscom Air Force Base for a while in research and development, then became an inspector, airworthiness inspector for the FAA. And after retirement from the FAA, worked as a volunteer at the Collings Foundation. So airplanes were in his blood. If he could have turned into an airplane, he would.
And did he fly missions?
No, he did not.
Okay, but he was, but he trained with them. He must have been on the tail end of that group.
I think he was, but his was more the ground support rather than flying.
Okay, Willie, now you've got this big event planned for Saturday, September 9th. Tell us a little bit more about the actual event you're going to have.
Yes, coming up Saturday, September 9th, we're going to have the Harvey Sanford Scholarship event. It's going to be hosted at the Collings Foundation in Stowe, Mass. And it's really booked to be a fun day of some history of the Tuskegee Airmen, but a little music, a little food, a little fun. The highlight of the day, two highlights of the day. We're going to have an original Tuskegee Airman World War II pilot, Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy, who flew in World War II, flew also in Korea, flew also in Vietnam. So he's rare in that respect. He's going to give some remarks based around his training, how he got involved in the Tuskegee Airmen, how he got into the Army Air Corps, and what that life was like at that time. His speech is going to sort of culminate with the other highlight, which is going to be the actual Collings Foundation flying a PT-17 Stearman, a plane that was actually used. This particular plane was actually used at Tuskegee to fly, to train pilots to fly. So Lieutenant Colonel Hardy is going to fly off in the plane, and after he flies off, the flights will be available to others who choose to donate to the Scholarship Foundation and receive a complimentary ride. So it's a fun day.
Lieutenant Colonel Harvey, I've met him before, and he is an amazing person, and it's going to be a real treat for anyone who is there. Bob, what about a little bit more about your museum, some of the fun facts that people might not know about your museum?
Well, we have about 85 historic vehicles, and included in there is an electric car, and most people think of electric cars as being a fairly recent phenomena. But in 1900, 40% of all the cars were electric cars.
You're kidding.
No, and 40% were steam, and only 20% were internal combustion engines. What they also don't realize that hybrids have been around since late 1800s. The first hybrid car was discovered then. So we have a bunch of other fun facts with all of the cars, like Henry Ford was one of the first green manufacturers. He would take the boxes that the parts came in and use them as floorboards in the Model Ts. So there's a lot of interesting history that goes on, and of course there's aviation there as well.
And where are you located exactly?
Stowe, Massachusetts, which is about 30 miles due west of Boston.
Oh, wow. Judy, maybe final few words from you. I guess the scholarship event. Why is this event, in your view, what do you want to say about that? Why it's important to the community and your family?
It's such an honor to have a scholarship named after my father. He would be so pleased to know about it and so appreciative. He loved his time working with Bob and the other volunteers restoring aircraft. He also thought that education is very important, and so to be able to have a scholarship named after him is truly an honor. The young man who has been chosen to receive the first Harvey Sanford Scholarship is going to be going to Bridgewater State in aviation, which would please my father very much.
Okay, all right, and we'll leave it right there.
Can I ask one quick
Real
thing
quickly, go
about
ahead.
Harvey Sanford? What she didn't mention is that every opportunity he had to talk to a young person about becoming a fine young person, an adult, about being educated, about learning, and he didn't talk to him about learning about aviation or war. He talked to him about being good citizens. Every opportunity he took to spread that word.
All the more reason that this scholarship be named in his honor. Willie Shellman, Judy Sanford-Harris, Dr. Judy Sanford-Harris, and Bob Collings, thank you all for coming in. And, wow, it sounds like going to be a great event. I hope everything goes smoothly.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, and in just a few minutes, how taking a selfie can win you a $1,000 shopping spree. All the details right here on Urban